All right, we're live. So happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome back into our NoCodeOps Live Community Show. I hope you're doing well, whether you're watching this video now live across our social media platforms or whether you'll be watching us in the future. It's really great to have you here. As per usual, let me know where you're joining us from. Drop me a message in the chat and I'll make sure, I read out your comments. It always, makes me smile whenever I see people from the community joining our shows. And we're together here again today talking about documentation, no code documentation, which is something that we've talked about in the past, but it's always been a hot topic in our community. And so we called another expert from our community, Tyler Sellhorn, who's been highlighted as one of our most valuable community members. He was spotted in our series of Spot and Op, and I'm so grateful that he's here today teaching us a little bit more about documentation and why it's so important. He considers himself and he calls himself a teaching-oriented technologist. And so without further ado, I'm going to call him in and let him introduce yourself. So, hi, Tyler.
Bow, bow, bow. The air horns bringing
The
it
air horn.
in hot. Thank you, Claudia. It is amazing to be here with you all.
There you go.
It is amazing to be here learning out loud with you all. I have a previous career in teaching secondary mathematics. So, I used to be a technology-oriented teacher. So yes, now I am a teaching-oriented technologist. Making use of lots of the no code stuff that but even just before we were talking, we were mentioning that turns out that some of the tools that you were using were kind of like the no code stuff, as it were. Like as soon as you started fiddling with the dials at all inside of that say CRM, right? You did any sort of routing of information, like this field now maps to that field. Yes, you're a no coder, right? I think that's really exciting to be a part of this version of the internet and of technology careers, is to be able to get the bits to talk to the other bits, as I said in that spot and op opportunity. So thank you again for having the opportunity to be spotlighted here with the NoCodeOps community. Very grateful for you and for Phil and everybody that's shown up and been willing to learn out loud together in the Discord and elsewhere. So thank you.
That's amazing. And we have people connected from all over the world today. I can see there's Jared from sunny California. Oh, I'm so jealous right now. I mean, I'm in London, so you all know what the weather is like here.
Mm-hmm.
So Charlotte, North Carolina, Buenos Aires, Argentina, West Michigan, Los Angeles.
Shout out to my high school football teammate, Aaron Sawyer. Thanks for dropping by.
Hey,
very exciting to be here with you, buddy.
No Code Tour from France, Toronto, Canada. Amazing. We all have the community here. And if this is your first time tuning in with us today, we're an international community for no-code operators, which is professional operators that leverage no-code tools in their day-to-day jobs and scale up their career thanks to those no-code tools. And so, Tyler, why is it so important that today we're focusing on documentation again? It's a hot topic in our community, and we often talk about it, but why is it so important that we dedicate all hour to building the right framework when it comes to documentation?
Well, I think one of the things that I appreciate and respect about operators in general, and especially inside of my own experience of being a customer success manager and leader, is that we're really, really oriented around the outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. Which tool we use, how you use it. We're very adaptable and changeable and willing to do the extra thing to get the thing to do the thing that you wanted it to do. And we're very, very much so focused on that outcome instead of being focused on okay, which way are we going to do it? And it's really important that if we are trying to achieve that outcome, that we give users of the technologies that we build what they need to be successful. So sometimes that's documentation. Sometimes it's just giving them the right URL and to be reflective and considered about which things we're providing to get the jobs done that we're being asked to help support.
Mm-hmm. And also, I guess, to maintain a clean process, the amount of times that companies reach out to us asking, hey, have you got, an operator that can come and sort out our mess, because they they might have been building their whole company, their whole processes, their all CRMs onto, whatever tool, you name it. And then at the end of the day, people in their teams don't know, which automation is connecting with.
Uh-oh, I think it's just me for a moment. Yeah, so I think it's really important
As well. Oh, sorry, we've lost the internet for a couple seconds. Tyler, are you back? There you are. Sorry, we lost the internet for a second. But yes, we were just saying, how important it is to maintain a clean process as well, and for companies to then translate and transmit that process for their teams, and for teammates to get organized and make sure that they also use a common understanding of what their flow looks like. So should we get your
let's pull it forward here, because I think just as you're doing that, it's really important. Like, as no code operators, I think sometimes we get engaged with companies in a way that, like, hey, set this up for us, or hey, get this fixed, or here, reorient these things together. I think it's really important for us to leave them with something that they can go and do for themselves. It's catch a man a fish, feed him for a day, right? Teach him how to fish, right? Now we have an opportunity to build value that might get us a referral or invited back. Like, oh, they set this thing up for us. Well, let's have them set up the next thing too. I think it's part of that service delivery component of the technology that you're building is the documentation that comes with it. Let's get things started. For sure.
Right, let's dive in. Here it is.
First of all, thank you to NoCodeOps for the ways that you spotlight community members. Top of my like portfolio is the old NoCodeOps logo. So I'm looking forward to like linking this back to the portfolio page with the new logo and all that fun stuff. So thank you very much for making me look cool, and also just noticing that I'm cool. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's go really meta for a moment when we think about documentation, right? And I want to invite you into the garden, right? I want to invite you on this path, right? We're going to mix the metaphors just a little bit and have this opportunity to think about, okay, sometimes the seeds of documentation are going to fall on the path, right? And they're going to get picked up by the birds, right? And be taken away. It was never meant for there to be any documentation, because that piece of documentation was never going to be used. It was never needed. But sometimes it's going to end up on some rocky soil and it'll be there for a moment and then burn up and go away forever. But others of them, we will be cultivating and pruning and harvesting those documents and reusing that seed again and again and again. So when you're thinking about documentation, don't think of it as one monolithic thing. Right? Think of it as there are these seeds that get spread about, and sometimes they take root and produce more fruit, and other times they do not at all. And if you are somebody that grew up in the church like I did, you'll know that I'm telling you the parable of the sower. So thank you, Jesus, for this metaphor for documentation. So there we go.
Colin says, great metaphor. I forgot to mention, people in the audience, make sure we always want these kind of events to be as interactive as possible. So if at any point you have a thought, you have a question, drop them in the chat. That's what I'm here for. I'm monitoring the YouTube.
I can see the chat as well.
Yeah.
I can see the chat as well. And I want to, there's going to be some moments where I do some like resting and give you a chance to reply. So be ready for that, because I definitely am a secondary mathematics teacher that would be doing some appropriate wait time. So
awesome.
The other metaphor that I want to invite you, there was a tree on the other picture too, is to just kind of be thinking about, okay, what is the trunk of your knowledge tree? When you think of knowledge management in the no-code operation space, right? What is the place that people can always go back to, that they can start from, to then go out onto the branches and find the different leaves of your no code system, right? Because there's going to be some parts of your system that they're very thick and very strong, and there's going to be other parts that are going to be less strong. They're going to be newer and younger, and they're going to be branching off and less solid, right? And the leaves come on and leave, and the seasons are going to transition through, do not assume that every season is the same. Sometimes your knowledge tree is going to lose all its leaves. Sometimes your knowledge tree is going to be full of bright, colorful, like obvious things, right? And then other times it's going to be little seed buds, right, and growing. So, all right. And then the last metaphor that I want to invite you into, and this is getting now we're zooming in a little further, right? Is to say, think of documentation as a product unto itself. What are your users trying to achieve with your documentation? Not your no code, setup, right? What are they trying to achieve with your documentation? And if there isn't a clear answer, right, you need to start asking your users, when you come to the documentation, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do with the information that I'm trying to give you as you use the systems I've set up for you, right? So I think of this very much so inside of a customer experience team, right? That's my background, right? I've done a lot of no-code things adjacent to and inside of the customer success, customer experience side of things. And it's really important to be constantly like adjacent to or shoulder to shoulder with watching somebody using your documentation or using your setup, and say to them, like, did you do the thing you wanted to do here? Were you able to accomplish it? Right? What are those jobs to be done by your documentation? Right? It's also worth asking the question. Now we're going super meta here, right? Is to say, does this even need to be documented? Right? Because sometimes things can be set and forget, and no one needs to know anything about it, right? It just works this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you even write that down. If you need more detail, just ask me separately, and we'll talk later here. A sustainable framework here is to say, like, okay, if you have too much of that, that's like,
I don't know if you're
go
gonna
ahead.
dive more into that, but
Yes,
I would say, like, a question for you would be, what's your opinion there? Should we create documentation for the whole process and then kind of group it into what's necessary for each team, or is that not even necessary?
Well, it really, this is a it depends answer, of course, right? But I think what does it depend on is maybe a better like reply to your question, right? I think it depends on how robust your system is already. Like if you have a very, very involved system that has lots of inputs and lots of outputs, and there is no kind of rhyme or reason to how it's set up or how someone who has never used it before can learn how to use it, it's important for you to kind of have a bigger rebuild of like what's going on here, and to like do the flow chart, and to like have the clickable, like get out to this extra thing, or like here is the nested folders about that specific system. I think those sorts of stuff is really, really important, right? Is to say, okay, this is how it works. These are the things that go in, but suppose you're starting from zero, right?
Yeah.
Maybe don't start with documentation. Maybe save that for when it's actually useful, right? And so those are kind of two extremes of whether like something that doesn't have any documentation at all, but really should have had it, or there's something that hasn't even been used yet. Like be smart about when you decide to even start having any documentation, and let your users be the guide. So, I mean, that's what I was wanting to transition to, is to have this conversation about a shared reality between the creators and users of the product, right? So why do we document our systems? Why do we have like a support site for big software companies, right? Why do we have a customer experience team that answers requests from customers? Well, it's to say, okay, what things do people need to know that they don't already know and that we need to teach them, right? Because if we don't already have that built into the product, right? This is going back to our seeds kind of analogy, right? If we haven't planted that seed yet, if we haven't cultivated it, if we haven't started harvesting from it and building a system around what do we do with the seeds when we harvest them? Do we replant them? Do we turn them into bread? Do we, all of these sorts of kind of things there where we're saying, okay, which things should be prioritized? Well, definitely not the things that ended up on the road and didn't get used, right? Definitely not the things that burned up as soon as they grew out of the ground, right? But definitely the things that found their way to the cultivated field where we're going to, continue to build a harvest from over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing that very often is the prompting for you even to appear, right? What happens when there is no shared reality between the creators and users of a product, right? Two things: requests and conversations, right? Requests are very often external. This is not always the case. It could be internal as well. But very often a customer or a client or someone that you're collaborating with has a question. They're asking for help. They're wondering, they're considering, they're deciding maybe yes or no about responding to an invitation from you. So requests, we'll go into depth here in a second, but requests are coming from external, right? But then conversations very often happens between, with yourself or with, people that are also building the robot with you. And you're saying to yourself, okay, people get to this point in the journey and then they don't go further. Why is that? Right? And these are the seeds of our future documentation, those customer requests and those conversations that are happening within our teams. Okay, so here it is. You get a request, right? First, we are going to reply to that request. That is the seed. That is the first, instance of that, and we're going to retain that reply. Don't just send it off and it disappear, right? Make sure that reply goes into a system that you can go back to again. And as soon as you see a second request of a similar type or the exact same type, we're going to refine that reply. And then if we get a third time where we're getting a similar request or the exact same request, we're going to record that down and we're going to put that into our release process. This is now going to be part of our documentation. And not only that, you got your little recycle sign there. We are going to continue to cycle through there. Sometimes it's going to be recycled into something else entirely, right? Other times it's going to be released again with a new version, right? A new type, right? And this is going to be something that again and again and again, right? Becomes how do we get to the point where it's definitely going to be something that we can return to and that we can ship and that we can send to people again, right? And so hopefully my alliteration there can help you remember this framework, but this is super duper useful. Request, reply, refine, record, release, right? And release is a very, very intentional word because you think of that as like a software release. Think of documentation as its own like plain text software release, right? Because it can be manipulated and managed the same way you might do that with other products. Okay. All right. So let's think this is the point where I'm going to do some wait time for everybody. I'm asking you all that are here a part of our conversation today. When you think of customer requests or even like partnership requests or whatever those inbound requests that are coming to you, what would be an example of that kind of question that we could use as an example to kind of run this process together? So what are the requests? I'm going to share one myself right now. Okay. Let's imagine we're brand new at a company, right? And we are building up the HubSpot, workflows at that company. We're like the first person that like has ever been hired in their team that like knows how to really use software. Like it's all like developers who like are coders, right? And then there's all these other people that are like non-technical and they're just, customer facing. We're going to be the person that like is a software nerd. Like that's very much, hi, I'm a software nerd, right? This is how I identify, right? And we're going to say to ourselves, okay, this request, right, comes in and says, how do I fill in that blank, right? How do I fill in that blank? And the reply that I make to that person is going to become a snippet in HubSpot. It might even become a URL that's provided automatically in a chat bot, right? It might become, something that is sent in an email automatically with every customer that we see. It's going to be something that we teach our team how to use eventually. Like, these are examples of like different releases of the same information based on that first reply that ever came in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Jared says, how many
Jared
payments
says, how
have
many
I
payments?
made? Right? How many payments have I made? So that first reply, right, is going to be, okay, you're going to go into the system and you're going to look it up and you're going to say, oh, you've made 17 payments, Jared, right? Okay, so that's that first reply. Now, what was the path that someone took to find that answer? Okay, so that's our refining. We've got a flow chart that takes us through the clicks that somebody went through on their browser to get to that information, right? And then now we're going to record that into something that can be automated. We can just press a button and those clicks will happen for us. And now we will have that be filled into a snippet that has an empty space for payment number and the Jared's customer name. And now the next release, we're going to turn that into something that is automatically given back to Jared when he asks without anyone's input, right? Because questions like that are like numerical. You don't need an agent, a live agent to be able to reply to that question. That can be provided, or it needs to exist on the dashboard that doesn't yet exist. Okay, well, place it on the dashboard and be able to answer it in the chat bot. Like, be omni-channel, right? Like, have all the different places that information can be gathered. Okay. Thank you, Jared, for engaging with that idea. And what is an example of documentation you're talking about? Okay. Let us know, Jared, if I'm giving enough examples. We are going to be very meta today. We're trying to be tool agnostic. I used HubSpot because that's the one that I have the most experience with, in that customer relationship management stuff. So, okay. Conversations, right? For example, this one right here, right? Claudia and I are having this conversation with you all here in the community, right? This is a quote unquote, I would say, voice version, right? A voice draft of this information, right? I'm going to be taking this and feeding it into the machine to give me back a transcript that I can turn into something that I can publish, right? Or maybe take pieces of. Right, this is a draft version, right? So we've got the voice version, we've got the draft version, and then let's say I have somebody that I'm reporting to. Maybe there's the COO, or there's some other person where I'm saying to myself, okay, we need to get this approved. Like, we've refined it enough so that it's lined up in a way that like this is using our language, and is going to be something that we really have a approved, ship it. Right. And then we're going to keep shipping in that same sort of fashion, right? We're going to say, okay, let's ship it. So what is the difference between requests and conversations as the inputs for our documentation? I just think that in my experience, people think of requests as coming internally, and then conversations might just come up in internally. Like we're trying to figure out how to help people that maybe aren't even sending us requests, right? But we're just noticing that they're not being successful yet doing this. Right. And so what did Claudia say to me? Like, hey, Tyler, would you like to be featured? And it's like, well, sure. What are people asking about? They're saying, oh, talk to us about documentation. Okay. Well, then what did I do? I've not given this talk before, right? This is a learning out loud space, right? So like, this is not the approved and shipped version of this conversation that we're having. This is the voice version. And maybe I put a deck together, right? So maybe we're into the draft side of things. And I did some refining of some dictation that I did to myself, right? But this kind of version of things where we're saying, okay, we're going to take conversations and we're not going to let them be ephemeral, right? We're going to take that Slack thread, and we're going to feed it into an LLM, right? And get a bullet points out of it, right?
Yeah.
We're going to take transcripts and we're going to re-record ourselves after we get better at this, right? So Don't
And I guess the
assume.
I guess the approve step then came also when you know, after we aligned on kind of the topic of our conversation today, when then I asked you to fill in the form to get extra information, and so we refined that message and then we shipped it in a form of having you all
Yeah,
here
that
after, you
Airtable
know.
that you send to people hasn't stayed static, right?
Exactly.
You've continued to make it better, right? And like sometimes in no code spaces, like we mentioned that Airtable form that you sent to me, um, like people know how to fill in forms, right? You don't need to have documentation around how to fill in a form, but you can improve the prompts in that form. That is the documentation for that no code process, right? Is to say, okay, we're not getting the right kind of answer. So we need to come back to the drawing board here on this question. People aren't understanding what we mean. We need to put some help text in the blank field. Oh no, we don't even want the blank field because everybody's answering the 3 ways every time. So we're just going to give them those 3 answers, and we'll leave an other for that rando person that's not going to fit our version. But like these are the kinds of things that you can do as you set things up. Like don't leave. Maybe go super meta is to say that, like, especially if it's inside of a screen, nothing that we can look at is immutable and unchangeable. We can change it. It is something that you can change. None of, I mean, you already, if you're listening to this, if you're in the NoCodeOps community and you've clicked, yeah, I'll listen to Tyler about the documentation stuff. You already know that software can be bent to your will. So do that. Don't stop short of doing that just with inside of a Zapier workflow or a HubSpot, workflow, or inside of a Make or a Glide app, right? Don't stop there. Keep bending it, keep tweaking it, tighten down the screws and get it to be exactly the way you want it to be.
Yeah, and that's what I think documentation allows you to do as well. Like the moment you have it written down somewhere, you're following that flow, you're following that flow chart, that process, you then have the opportunity, as you're saying, to look at it and see, okay, what can be improved? Why am I not getting the answers that I'm hoping for? Why do I have to explain this process to my teammates twice or 3 times? It needs to be changed. And so you look back at your process, at your documentation, and you iterate and you make it better, you improve. But you have to have it down. You have to start. You have to have the global idea and the outcome that you wish for. So that's really important.
And you're right on to zero in, get laser focused on being reflective and considered about whether or not you actually did the thing. Right? Did we do it? Right? did they get the job done? Right? Those are the questions that we want to ask. So, okay, so here is like a whole bunch of other stuff that I wanted to make sure that I put into the into the doc for us to have here, and we can go deeper on any of these. If one of these is speaking to you in the audience more than another, please just if you've got an emoji shortcut typing like I do on my computer, you can just type the emoji in there, or you can pick one of those there on the left. And we've already been talking about this today, and this is why I've chosen it to be the first thing. Stay in draft, keep iterating. That is the thing that Claudia was saying right there at the top just a second ago, right? Is to say, do not assume that what you shipped yesterday is still legit, right? Keep all of that documentation and your product and your systems with an open hand. Is this still serving us? Yes, it is. Okay, great. Oh, let's add this too, right? Let's add this too. Oh, no. Let's get rid of all of that. Let's put this other thing there as well now, right? Oh, we need to just forget that even platform at all and do something else entirely. Yes. Do not treat any of it as unchangeable, right? And that's what we were talking about just a second ago. Okay. Some frameworks, some additional frameworks. Use hierarchy. Which things are more important than other things, right? If it's only useful for a very specific set of users, make that hidden to all the other users, right? use folders, use nesting, use user permissions, right? One of the things that I've done at a previous company, I was in charge of the knowledge management re-implementation there, and we made the sidebar obey the org chart, right? The only things that were in the org chart were the things that were in the knowledge management system. So it was very much so a team-based set of documentation and who could make documents in those places versus other places. That's really important, especially for you as an operator. Sometimes you don't want this set of users to know about that system that's over here. So be smart about using hierarchy in appropriate ways according to requirements. Invite questions. In your documentation, there should be a place to click all the time to ask an additional question. Invite those requests, right? To let you know which things people don't know, even after reading your doc, right? You know, because you might have thought that the documentation was great and it accomplished the goal, but you're only going to know if you check for that understanding. So ask that question. Did you, lots of good support sites now like have this as a part of their base template. But like if it's not there, or if you're doing something bespoke, put it there, right? Put a form at the bottom with an open text box that says, what were you hoping to find out here that you didn't know? Oh, well, we have a document for that, but well, then you should link it on that page, because some way people are finding this page instead of that page. So make sure that it's linked. Were you looking for We'll link to that from the other page. Like that is, you know, why do those things pop up there? Well, because people went looking in the wrong place. It doesn't matter that they went looking in the wrong place. You just need to provide that to them. You know, maybe they put the wrong search term in there. Maybe you go back and look and see, okay, what was the path that they took to get to that document? Oh, well, we need to put them on a different path even to start with. And that's, you know, right there, you know, analyzing usage, right? You know, what's helpful to people? How are they using it? Where are they getting help from? Which ones do they ask for support from? And kind of embedded in all of this here, right, is there at the bottom. It's bolded and underlined, but like you need to teach your team and customers, or you need to do this for customers. You need to request and reply with URLs. No one should have to Google that for you, right? And no one should have to ask back, hey, what URL are you looking at? It's really, really important that you make it easy for the other person to take action on your requests. Okay, you know, deleting, right? Get ruthless. Like which things need to go away? Which branches need to be cut off, right? And then last bit there, you know, just in time, right? Think about what's needed. Think about what is actually needed. Don't start building a huge set of documents if that's not something that's needed. That's a lot of wasted time that you could have been building another no-code system that was going to just solve the problem without anybody having to ask a question, right? So if it needs documentation, great. If it doesn't need documentation, skip it. Like it's not required. So don't do that.
That goes back. I think that goes back to my question from a couple of slides back. Yep. When do you know that something requires documentation?
There was a request or a conversation about that system. Right?
Awesome. The 5 R's.
The users will tell you, or you as you're building it will be like, yeah, feels like this is a thing that people aren't going to understand. Okay, well then turn that into a voice draft it out, get it approved, ship it. Right?
Yeah.
Here comes a request. Oh, okay. Well, let's reply there. Right? Let's refine that reply. Let's record that reply, and then let's release it. Right?
And that's why people, when join the community, get a Discord tutorial from me, and they also have the documentation right there in the server if they're looking for more. So
and as soon as you get a request that's like, hey, how do I do blah blah blah,
send the URL.
You're always coming back. Okay, well, how do I get that to be further up the list? Right? How do I get that to be bolded in a different way? Right? You know, like those are the types of things that we've got to be reflective and considered on it to help people actually accomplish what they're trying to accomplish.
That's cool. I feel like people with light OCD are really great at documentation, like me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that's interesting about digital workplaces, right, is that we can make, one size fits one, right? Instead of it being one size fits all, right? So often when we went back to an office, it was the 1950s white man that the building was optimized for, right? Well, instead, my office is full on like podcaster setup and like all that sort of stuff, and like other people will never be on camera ever, so like they've got a whole other different system going on. Okay, well, like that, we don't need to have it the exact same way. In fact, it should be unique and different. I would imagine, even though that you are on camera quite a bit, you've got your Floxy stuff hanging out and being awesome, right? Whereas I'm got the naval tchotchkes and my air horn loudspeaker going on back there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know what's up. But why is that special and unique? Well, because in a digital workplace, it can be in a specific path.
It's documenting your personality.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
We do have some questions in our in the form. So if that's okay with you, Tyler, we can open up the Q&A.
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Awesome. All right. So let me pull in some of these questions that we had. So from Ashley. Hi, Ashley. Can you please share 3 best practices for documentation? I feel like we can probably just repeat the ones that you shared already.
Yeah. So I would just say that number 1, to zoom out and think which things do or do not need documentation in the first place. So start with it doesn't need to be. There doesn't need to be. And then I would say those 2 processes that I put around reply, requests and conversations, right? So sending a reply, refining it, recording it, and releasing it, right? And then you've got the other piece where you're having a conversation. Okay, well, there's the voice draft. Let's draft it up. Let's get it approved, and then let's ship it.
Interesting question here from James. How do you leverage templating in your docs? Let me share that in the chat. How do you leverage templating in your docs?
For me, I think that's very, very context dependent, right? So I think there's going to be, if you're repping one company or you're repping, this other company, or you're doing something service-based or you're doing something product-based, that's all going to be very dependent upon that. And I think that, it's really, really smart to get things in versions that fit your systems that you already use. That's the big thing, right? Is to say, okay, I'm going to use snippets, or I'm going to use, all kinds of different stuff. So, yeah.
I know that we've kept our conversation today kind of tool agnostic, and I love that. But obviously, we do have the questions about the tools. So what is the best tool for automated documentation of your project? Asks Wash.
I don't know. So when we start getting into documentation, I don't think that is certain parts of the documentation process can be automated, but I think in terms of where does this come from and how does it get started, it's always going to be in that change management, layer of your system. So I think that's really important to just kind of start there. I am a huge fan of using the thing that your users already understand, right? So I'm staying tool agnostic, but if I was to pick one to get people to start using, I'm a huge fan of Almanac. So why do I like Almanac? It's kind of the part that I love most about it is that it has Git style versioning. But they don't call it Git. They call it layers, something much more friendly to a non-technical audience. But having a shipped version, right? And then you can have layers on top of it that can be diffed back to shipping to the original. And so you can have lots and lots of different versions that may obey different sets of priorities. You might even have like a version that is using the requests that other people have laid on top of it. You can even have certain submissions, like create a new layer, and you can start like doing things with it that way. I'm a big fan of their product.
Awesome. There's a really nice question here from Andy. I think it's from Andy. Yeah, Andy Bailey. Really nice question. How do you create a culture of documentation?
I think it starts with that stuff that we talked about, where we're going to be outcome oriented, right? If we want to help our users, we're going to teach them how to use our stuff. Or we're going to build things that don't need taught. And sometimes those kind of like are kind of have this dialectical kind of like conversation back and forth with each other. As the product improves, different questions occur. We improve the product so that we don't have those questions anymore. And now there's different questions. And the best products are the ones that are obvious to every kind of user, but sometimes that can't even be done, right? So it's like, okay, well, all right, how do we build a culture of documentation? We have to build a culture of outcomes orientation. If we want people to be successful with our products, we have to, with the things that we create, we have to create the learning experiences around them for them to be successful with them. Or we need to like get rid of them in the product, like the things that are creating the necessity for documentation.
And this ties really well to our next question from Dan. How do you then teach other team members in using your documentation or SOPs?
I think it's really important. This is, how do you teach other team members in using your documentation? I think it's really important for you to stop, right? And to think, like, if you're teaching other team members how to use your documentation, maybe you need to improve the way that you're, like, if you need documentation for your documentation, you need to reset like where you started. And Jared's mentioning that Loom is a great tool. I am a big believer in using tools that automatically record your tone of voice, your cadence of speaking, transcribe your stuff. And Loom is not the only one that does that. So I want to encourage you to be willing to be recorded, right? And then to refine those replies, right? And then record them and continue to release new versions. So like,
we actually also have Dan here from Tango, and Tango is one of my favorite tools from documentation. So I'm so happy.
I think there's some of those. I think some of those screen sharing applications that are like even more focused on documentation and like user pathway stuff, like can be the seeds of really great documentation or product improvements.
And speaking of Dan and Tango, he's got a question for us. How do you differentiate between documenting to teach and documenting an SOP for reference? What are the broad types of documentation you consider when first getting started?
Yeah, I think for me, like this is my experience. I don't know that this is for everyone, but for me, I'm much more interested in the just-in-time, kind of version of documentation. When you get a request, people aren't able to figure it out just by using the product. That is the signal to create documentation. And I'm not going to, for the most part, I'm not, unless we've had a conversation where it's like, yeah, we probably need to document this. I'm going to let the product speak for itself, and then the users ask the questions. And this might be one of those things where like user journeys, right, are and user research is really important. Like before you ship a product to people, you're going to find out where the edges of the thing are, like doing the QA and doing like, when are we going to break this? How do we break this? Will everyone break this? Okay, well, we need to fix that, or we need to provide documentation so that people don't break it. And I think that, really from that end is more important than anything else.
Awesome. Jared's got a question here. How can you tell the difference between when a lack of an intuitive user interface indicates that to improve your documentation or if you need to improve your user interface. Okay, so a question between is your UI performing well, or is it a matter of my documentation?
Well, I think that documentation fills in the gap as the user interface improves, right? So when someone is telling you, I don't know how to use this yet, right? They are telling you that the user interface isn't that good. And that is the moment to decide, am I going to document this? Am I going to improve the user interface, or am I going to do both? Right? And who's to say? Like, this is something that you're going to have to ask the user. And if they don't reply, you're going to have to guess just based upon your experience. And you're going to know better than anyone else. If you're actually talking to customers, if you're actually talking to users, they'll be able to tell you, or you'll be able to guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jared, let us know, if that answers your question. We've got a question from Gabrielle. How to communicate better with different stakeholders?
So one of the things that's going to happen when you think about documentation, right, is that sometimes there isn't going to be budget or time set aside for that, like activity, right? And so it's really important to like slowly but surely build space and margin inside of your time to be like considerate of like what needs improved in your documentation side of things, or like in the customer experience side of it, it's out of queue time, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to improve these screenshots, I'm going to do a screen share, I'm going to rewrite this doc. There's always those kinds of tasks that are in the backlog, right? And if you can set up a really agile system where like people are pulling from that, like, oh, I had these questions the other day, I'm going to make this, I'm going to put this in my sprint. Those are really, really good things to do. So how do you communicate better with different stakeholders? I would say have that backlog, right, of which things are getting worked on in a space that everyone can see. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody thinks something's important, like, very often I would have a CEO or an executive, come in and say, hey, do this next. Okay, well, we'll be pushed on that. Right. But for the most part, like they're not involved in that stuff. Like that's not something they need to be thinking about. You are thinking about that because you're the one that I think that the responsibility for documentation and the authority to update it should be as close together as possible.
Yeah, great. We have lots of questions, Tyler.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Awesome. I told you it's a hot topic in the community. So from Veronica, how to make other areas collaborate and make documentation in the same place and with the same process, and how do you make a quality check on how it's documented?
I would say that, like, what is that? So what I'm hearing the questioner asking is, I know there's some people that are terrible at writing things down. This set of people that I get a chance to work with don't do this activity, and I know that they should, right? This is where I invite you to use that conversation framework, right? Have a recorded video conference with them, right? Make them share their screen with you, right? It's almost like making them do the loom, right? And then you can ship that and iterate on top of that. Very often it's going to be something that you're responsible to like update the thing that they know about. And so this is also the request and reply with URLs note that I would encourage you with, is to say, hey, so-and-so, do you have a URL that I can point this customer to about this question they're asking? And then they're like, let me make one for you. Because we've had like a dozen people ask the exact same question, right? So, yeah. Jared's bringing up another tool. I'm a TLDV fan, so I've got a shout out to those people. So like there are lots and lots and lots of tools that are building this space to fill in the gap of people that won't write things down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Write it down for them by just recording the video conference that you had with them.
Indeed. We have a question from Bruno Cassiano, who's watching us from LinkedIn. Hi, Bruno.
Hi, Bruno.
Do you think documentation is the basis for a successful remote first company?
Yes.
Good question.
Yeah, I would say that. So like, I am a, like recognized remote accelerator, like thought leader person. And I'm a huge fan of how GitLab shows up, right? They have used their tool to be the document, the shared reality of their company is their GitLab handbook, right? And it is managed through. So I mentioned Almanac earlier, right? Almanac is a much less technical product, but like using GitHub or using there's other tools that like integrate with those tools to make it easy for you to like put onto a website. I think that like having Notion hooked up through a super.site, like I have sites that like I use that way, right? I think that having your no code stuff be the back end for like externally facing stuff, yes, you should be doing that. And those are the things that are going to be a part of being successful as a remote first company. I think it's you can just drop off the remote first and just say, do you think documentation is the basis for a successful company? Yes. Having a shared reality, right, from which you can like increase the velocity of decision making. Yep, let's go.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we did invent writing for progressing as a
now. Why is it that
society,
humanity were hunter gatherers for eons, and then they started writing things down and became people that would have a live stream across the Atlantic with one another? Like how did we get from there? Well, it's because we started writing things
thanks
down.
to documentation.
Exactly.
Question from another Veronica. Hi, Veronica. Do you think no, that's another one. Sorry, another one here. Is there a way to automate documentation? I know, meta.
I think the thing that is most easily automated for documentation, right, is that when you ship it, right, that you set up a reminder to revisit that documentation. That is the number one tip that I would suggest to you all, is to have a cadence on new documentation being revisited. And then like have, quarterly or biannually or annually kind of like say to ourselves, okay, this is going to be documentation week or whatever, right? And say, which things are we going to archive? Which things are we going to delete? Which things are we going to, and like have process for doing that throughout the year, but like having those moments in time where you've planted a flag to say, this is about documentation right now, because, we want to like, how do you automate it? You automate it because through having reminders to do it, right? What are the reminders? We talked about it, right? It's requests, it's conversations, and it's just like your calendar. Put it in your calendar, and say, okay, send yourself an email with that URL. Schedule send. Like that's the baseline, like zero setup at all, right? Just send yourself an email with the URL on a schedule send for a month from now, and revisit that document.
Yes, or you can use our tool as well, because that's literally what we're working for. You can use Operator, which plans to generate auto-generated documentation. And on top of that, we also have another question here that I feel we can satisfy with Operator. And also obviously Tyler, if you have any more recommendations for this. But I thought, as I was reading the question, I was like, oh yeah, we got a solution for you.
Yeah. So use Operator, but then also I would say use the operating systems that you already have. Like use like browser extensions. Use
Mm-hmm.
the browser at all to just like ingest like what's there and have it clean up that like use regular expressions to just get the thing out, right? The thing that I think is less understood, even among us that are like software nerds, right, is that if it is digital, you can remix that data in a way that serves you better, right? Don't assume that it's stuck in this other version. No. If you can see it on your computer screen, you can OCR that text and then edit it, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. The other question that I thought, as I was reading, I was like, yeah, operator, what's the best no-code tool for change logs? The pace of changes in IT can be quite stifling if you don't keep track of all the changes. Do you have any other recommendation?
I'm like I've already said it earlier in our conversation, but I'm like so hard in the paint for just in time stuff. Like most people don't need to know, nor will they ask. So like having change logs. I think there's some systems have that built in. Well, use them, right? Some systems don't have that. Well, do you need it? Maybe not.
Yeah. And if you do, once again, as I was reading that, I was like, operator, that's a great tool for you for that use case.
Exactly.
All right. Let me see. Let me see if we have one more question, because I saw something to do with Airtable, of course, because we have to drop a little sprinkle of Airtable in all our events, because we have, all our community members here are huge fans of this tool. From Megan, yeah. Let me drop her question here. How do you ensure consistency in tracking automations across multiple Airtable bases?
Well, this has been the last 10 minutes of referencing operator every single question. So how do you make sure that my system works right and we can tell people that it is, right? Yeah, of course you should be using operator. I think like, how do you ensure consistency? I think number one, you need to have like some basic like duplicatable like versions of things. Like it's like, okay, we always start this way, right? Don't make your thing will be eliminated. It will be set for being destroyed if you don't obey our conventions, if you don't comment, if you don't document, if you don't, like, if those are things that are required in your system. You're saying goodbye to the thing that I created if you're not going to do it. I mean, like, this is going into a whole other set of things, but like, I think it's really important to be invitational to people, to say like, hey, would you please? And if they RSVP no enough times to your invitation, you need to start inviting them to go work someplace else. And but at the same time, like give them that autonomy to like, you know what, I'm not going to do all the bonus stuff until I know it's for sure, and then I'll come back and do that. Okay, that's fine, but you're going to end up like making more work for yourself and for us if you do that.
But also, Tyler, I'm going to show you that I'm a really fast learner, and using your teaching from today, I'm going to take this question here, and which is a request. I'm going to reply, I'm going to refine, record, and release, and I'm going to host another event where somebody will come here and show you, Megan, how to ensure consistency in tracking automation with Airtable bases.
Boom.
Dropping this mic. I can't. It's on a boom arm.
Yeah, same.
All right. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for being here with us today, and for being with us at NoCodeOps. You're an incredible member of our community. I'm ever so grateful. Thank you for making the time to share your expertise with us once more. And where do we reach out to you if people want to connect with you? What's the best place where they can find you?
tcell.link has all the things. So I'd love to connect, follow, reply, subscribe, etc. There it is, right there.
I like that.
tcell.link. That's my place that you can click all the things that are important to you.
Amazing. And folks, if you've enjoyed today's event, our community is free. Join. You have to submit an application that I will personally review. So if you go past me, then you will be joining the NoCodeOps community.
Yeah, DM me on the Discord too if you want to just chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tyler. Have a fantastic day ahead and stay safe. And I'll see you next time.
Blessings. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, everyone. And
Bye.
I'm going to do another A-horn. There you go. Just for you. Bye.
Bye-bye.